And this is our interview with John Poliquin. Hi, I'm Mark White with Discovery Martial Arts. When we decided to do NENC this year, the first person that we thought of that we needed to have as one of the instructors in terms of just unbelievable talent, unbelievable charisma, skill, uniqueness, just a vision of this art and interpretation of this art unlike any others, it was Hanshi John Poliquin. I mean, there was just absolutely no doubt about that. I've had the opportunity to train Mr. Poliquin for over 20 years now, and even to this day, you know, through thousands and thousands of training lessons with him, he still amazes me. The way that he sees the things, the way that he moves, the way that he interprets things. And in terms of like a charismatic, caring like teacher, a guy who really puts his soul into to actually teaching this art, you'll find no better. And so we had a chance to kind of sit down with him and chat and talk about his history and what he sees in the art, where he sees the art going, what he's learned, how much it's meant to him. And we want to share that with everybody just because it's important to hear. And on top of that, come to NENC in October. Tickets are up on Eventbrite, and come experience it for yourself. You will not be disappointed, I promise you.
Good morning. We have Mr. John Poliquin with us. Sir, thank you for jumping in with us this morning. Looking forward to chatting a little bit with you.
My pleasure.
For full transparency for viewers, Hanshi Poliquin has been my teacher for a long time, and it's my pleasure to bring him in, and a pleasure for us to have him as one of the 3 instructors for NENC 2023. Sir, you and I have had a long time to get to know each other, but I want to make sure that folks who are watching this and getting a chance to join us at NENC get to know a little bit about you and your background. I was hoping you could share with us, you know, your career history and where that's brought you today.
Wow. Well, goes back quite a ways now. So way back in 77, I guess, 78, 77, back in college, I started judo. So had a couple of good instructors, competed in judo tournaments, eventually left college, started a career, and was teaching judo, but eventually I got to a place where I was looking for more from the art. Judo was fun and it was fantastic and it was great, but it was never intended to be a comprehensive martial art, a comprehensive system. So I spent literally a couple of years looking around for the what I would consider the ultimate martial art, or at least something that I was looking for. I visited lots of different instructors all over the place, never really found what I was looking for. And then I got an invitation in the mail, not so much an invitation, but an announcement about this ninjutsu seminar taking place in the woods of Ohio, so to speak. So went to that and I was amazed, really. And then Stephen Hayes came to Portland back in 1984, and I attended that. And after the seminar, I approached him and I said, look, I know I'm not an instructor and I don't have any rank or anything, but would you mind if me and some of my friends, if we could train with some of this material and get a little bit better at it? So he was like, oh, God, sure, go right ahead, go right ahead. And by virtue of the fact that you've been to a single seminar, you get to be the group leader. So that was great. And really been training in ninjutsu ever since. In the old days, it was very active. I mean, we didn't have ninjutsu schools anywhere. There was nothing in Maine. So I had to fly out to wherever Stephen Hayes was teaching, or wherever there happened to be a Taikai a little bit later on. But so I ran a school for a number of years, and then back in 97, I guess, quit my job, moved to Portland, Maine, and started a full-time school. Been doing it ever since.
Much like Mr. Davis, it's very funny. I ask you both that question of tell me your history of the first spots is whew, wow. All right. So you
Well,
have
Mark was around back in those days. One of the first seminars that I went to was in Portland that Stephen Hayes was doing, and Mark had come up for that. And I think that was back in 1984.
wow. Back before I was born. So jumping in on a question from there is with all of these decades put forth into the art, and you're still active, you still help us at the school now. You still work with a few of us here privately, and I'd like to know what about ninjutsu in particular continued to drive you as a practitioner and as a teacher.
Wow. I think it's martial art. I think tremendous potential for individual personalized development. So for me, one of the things that first drew me to was that it was very comprehensive. There's punching, kicking, throwing, grappling, weapons, defense against weapons. There was a psychological aspect to the training, and there wasn't anything you could possibly imagine as being useful in a self-defense kind of situation that really wasn't a part of what we were studying. That was a part of the art. And that's really pretty rare. If you look at most martial arts these days, they tend to be grappling or they tend to be striking. Those are two big kind of divisions. Even ones that are multi, maybe like MMA, have a lot of rules. And those rules are good. They're intended for people's safety. But in response to this, one of the other things that's always attracted me is over the years, I look at the group of people that the dojo has attracted to come in and train in this art. And just with perhaps senior people in our art, all of these people were kind of looking for something, perhaps different things. Some were looking for an effective way to get rid of that feeling of fear or intimidation. They wanted to get some kind of control in their lives. They wanted to make sure they could keep themselves safe if they were ever attacked. We've had people come into the school and literally tell me point blank that that's what I'm looking for. Others have literally said, you know what, this seems like a good group of people and I need a positive place to hang out that is not unhealthy for me. It's not a bar. It's not whatever. And so I think one of the things that's, again, attracted me to this is I look at the positive impact that the training in the dojo has had on people's lives, so many people's lives over the years. And that's really been quite an inspiration.
I can attest to that myself. I think life would be very, very different if I hadn't walked in the door myself. I'm getting the chance now, alongside Mr. White, to see that impact on students in a longer term. And it's something that has become, I was saying this to Mr. Hardy, that's really kind of become a big driving force as far as what continues to motivate us. It's a big part of the conversation. So I'm glad to hear that that is something that that motivated you as well. You mentioned earlier, we were talking a little bit about some of the psychological side of training. We're talking a little bit about the impact of it on someone's personal life. Can you tell us a little bit more about how ninjutsu impacted your life? What did it change for you?
Boy, that's
Easy question, right?
excuse me.
Short question.
Yeah, I could probably write a book on something like that. So a lot of changes. I personally, it's hard for me to even imagine who I would be as an individual, what kind of person I would be today if I hadn't had all of those experiences, the teachers that I've had, the training friends that I've had, and frankly, a lot of lessons learned. Um, some of them martial, some of them more social or personal. And it's I mean, the changes were I think significant. Again, it's hard to go back and try to imagine what other path would somebody have gotten on, would I have gotten on if I hadn't latched on to this and kind of followed it to where we are today. But if I hadn't, maybe Mark White wouldn't be training, maybe you wouldn't be training, maybe all of the hundreds of people that have come through and into the school, what would they have done? You know, there's kind of a ripple effect on that. And I think, I mean, for me, I originally got into the martial arts, because I I didn't want to rely on someone's good graces for my own safety. It concerned me at one point that when I first got to college, when you see guys that are like college football players, college basketball players, these are big men, and they're very assertive, which is part of what makes them very good in their sports. And it occurred to me that if one of these gentlemen decided to harm me in some way, which no, they didn't, there would be probably very little I could have done about it. And that was a concern of mine. It niggled at me a bit. And that's ultimately what drove me into martial arts. And through all these years, I can say I no longer have that concern. I no longer have that fear. I no longer feel intimidated by other individuals. And I don't view that from a martial standpoint. And that's perhaps an important distinction. I don't view it in the way that, oh, I feel that I'm skilled in martial arts and now I could handle myself physically against this person. As a result of all the experiences I've had, it is more, I don't feel the need to do that. I don't feel the need to do that. Um, I think it has, you know, people would probably disagree or have words with me, but I think it's made me a better person. I think I am actually far less inclined to get into a conflict now than I would have been back before I was even taking martial arts.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So let's get a little bit more granular. You're going to have a chance to train with some students who may not have had a chance to work with you in the past. That's the hope and the dream anyway.
Yeah.
Uh, can you tell us a little bit about your approach to training and what methods have worked well for you?
Well, first of all, I should say that it's probably been, it started off to be fairly haphazard. I mean, I was all over the place, because when you're trying to develop a method, there are a lot of dead ends taken, so to speak. We go down a lot of roads. Who was it? Edison, who said, "Well, I didn't fail 1,000 times making the light bulb. I invented 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb." And that's an interesting difference in perspective. So the same is probably perhaps the same for me martially, in that you try something. And I think, you know, Mr. Hayes used to comment to me every now and then where he'd say, "Oh, we're trying this at the school. This is going to be great." And then 2 or 3 months later, I'd be chatting with him and I would say, "So how's this is going?" He'd be like, "Yeah, we're not doing that anymore." Okay. But that's how we grow, right? That's how we learn. If we're never making any mistakes, there's probably something a little off there. So early on, I think my training, now actually getting back to your question, early on, I think my training, I focused it to be quite physical in nature. I was young, in shape, and I was really looking for an art that would help keep me safe physically. And so that was what I was looking for, and that's what I experienced. I wanted to have a very physical aspect to the training. This was making sure, proving to myself that the techniques would work, that they were effective, that kind of thing. I don't know if Mark has showed you any of the old videotapes I shared with him, some of the seminars and things like that. But over time, you eventually start to realize, I think, that there's a problem with that. If I'm really just relying on strength and muscle and anger to fuel some kind of success in a conflict, that is no longer going to be successful when I don't have the strength, when I'm older, when I don't have the aerobic capacity, when I'm not as angry as an individual. Those things that fueled the physical success are no longer going to work. So I personally changed my training and what I was teaching in the dojo for a couple of years. And we were focusing really on efficiency of movement. How effective could we be to, hold on for just a sec here. I lost you. My computer did something. How effective, how efficient could we make our movement so that we were using less muscle, right? Less force to make things happen. And after doing that for a couple of years, you start to realize, okay, this is really good. It's been helpful. But in and of itself, that is not going to be enough. You still do need the intention. You need the muscle. You need the techniques. You need to be able to throw somebody down on the ground. You just can't get out of the way and expect them to fall. So it kind of created a spiral in my own training where I'd focus on the physical aspects. Then I'd spend some time focusing on subtleties, movement, positioning, efficiency, doing as little as I possibly could to still make things effective. Until I finally figured out that I could actually do both of those things at once, right? We could use the movement, the efficiency. It took me a long time. I was a slow learner. And where we could combine those two. And it was then that you start to realize that really the effectiveness and the physical aspect of it was really due to some of the subtle stuff, the efficiency of the movement, the positioning, the timing, the distancing. Even the mental emotional approach we have toward training in the school, you know that we sometimes talk about how we're really not so much interested in the destination as much as the journey. And oftentimes, if we're doing some kind of movement or technique, and let's talk about training in general, if we have one particular goal on that, we miss so much that we might otherwise learn and experience. And as you've discovered, I think that oftentimes it's really not the destination we should be searching for, it's the journey. And that realization actually, I think, opens up a path to training where eventually someone with your skill level and those that are above are really kind of focusing on how can I be in just the right place at just the right time. It's not about, boy, I'm going to make sure I do a ganseki nage on this guy or an osotogake. It's really, we don't approach it from that perspective. So its effectiveness through body movement. It took me a long time to figure that out, despite the encouragement and the teachings from people who are trying to make me better.
I appreciate that answer, and it is something that working on that myself and getting a chance to train with you and start going through that process, I can tell you I'm benefiting personally in my own training a lot from that idea, from that notion. It is freeing. And
Almost weird, isn't it? Because it's like there's a difference between thinking to yourself, okay, well, I'm grappling with this individual. I'm going to do osotogake, which is a destination-oriented thing. I want this person to something to happen to them, versus approaching it from, I'm just going to move my body over here and allowing the osotogake or the person going down to the ground to be the natural result of that. They're really two very different things.
I came across a great term for I think what you're describing from Mr. Davis as let something manifest. Things manifest
Yes.
better for you,
Yeah.
and that's getting a chance to feel that and experience that is that's becoming more frequent, and it's a good feeling. I look forward to to folks who get a chance to train with you, getting to learn a little bit more about that. Um, that brings us back to the conference here really quick, because one of the things that we've discussed between ourselves, Mr. White and I have discussed, we discussed with Mr. Merritt on a couple of occasions, is sort of the if not a destination here that we're looking for, we're certainly moving toward the future at a constant rate. And I'd like to know what challenges you think ninjutsu as an art, as a concept, as a system, uh, what challenge does ninjutsu face as it moves into the next decade, next couple decades here, particularly in America?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think it's really quite huge. One of the benefits of the art, some of the greatest things about it may also be some of its weaknesses, right? So it's funny when something's one of the things about ninjutsu, I think that's a great strength, is it's very much allows itself to be interpreted as an art form, so to speak. As a result of that, there are a lot of different interpretations of that out there. And let's be honest, some of those are going to be maybe very physical, very practical, very effective. Some of them are going to be more artistic, perhaps meditative. Some of them may be more oriented toward exercise or fitness. Some of them may be social. There are all sorts of reasons why people might train. And ninjutsu as an art, it's the very fact that we have all those differences, both a wonderful thing, but it's also kind of a threat to the art. If you can imagine, I think probably there are very few people in the world training in the art the way Hatsumi Sensei trained with his teacher, right? And that may be a good thing, it may not be a good thing. So ultimately, I think there's an old saying, students find the teachers they deserve, teachers find the students they deserve. And ultimately, people will go to different places to learn different things. But when I first got involved in this, there were essentially the whole thing was driven by two personalities, Dr. Hatsumi and Anshu Stephen Hayes, right? These were the two. So the only time I'd really even heard of Hatsumi Sensei was because Stephen Hayes brought the art back to America and started teaching it, his interpretation of it. Now, I really liked that interpretation of it. I thought it was amazing. And I think one of Stephen Hayes's gifts was that he had a way of bringing that art to life in a way that was relevant for people in the Western world, right? That was an incredible thing. Now, after the fact, there were a lot of people who criticized him for that. He was teaching differently than they taught. He had a different curriculum that they did in Japan. Well, yeah, thank goodness, because that may be required. So the issue now is moving forward. Hatsumi Sensei was such a figure in this art, right? As Soke, there really isn't anybody to step into that role anymore, to be that figure. Stephen Hayes is the same thing. He is an incredibly skilled individual with, I'm going to say, an impressive charisma about him, right? He's very knowledgeable, very engaging. Nobody, when Stephen Hayes retires, and he kind of is semi there, there isn't anybody to take his place. There isn't another Stephen Hayes. Stephen Hayes was a very unique individual, a product of his time, incredibly skilled, incredibly gifted, very knowledgeable on how to bring this art out into the world. So, but where do we go without those two figures? Where do we go without a Stephen Hayes, without a Hatsumi Sensei? And there would be others who would speak up, and it's like, well, you know, I was around back in those days. And it's like, well, one, you weren't. And two, when you did come along, honestly, it's not the same. I know there are people out there that might have certain visions of themselves, but we carry on as best we can. I'm carrying on as best I can. So Stephen Hayes was my principal teacher and instructor over all these years. I learned a tremendous amount from him. I'm still very thankful to have had all of those experiences. And yet I teach in a way that is different from the way he teaches. So when we look at the art going forward, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's very hard to tell. Even we look at perhaps something like MMA, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kind of thing. Very effective martial art. But when we go back to the origins, let's say, of that, I have a feeling that the contests, more than a feeling, that the contests that were originally fought didn't quite have all of the rules that they have today for their own safety. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of the safety, because you want people to be able to practice and grow and learn. But what has that done to the art? What will it do to the art down the road? So there are martial arts that used to be very physical, very combative, and they're kind of sliding into this less combative. Yes, it's for public consumption. It's safer for people to come. And that's a good thing, so that people can experience a lot of this stuff and benefit from it in a way that is personal for each individual. But with each generation, while something is maybe added, something is also taken away, something is lost. Stephen Hayes may have taught something, may have had knowledge in areas that I don't possess, so I'm not passing that on to my students. I've added other things that weren't really a part of the scrolls, let's say, or the original teaching. So I think the challenge is there are a lot of people out there who they run their own schools. They're kind of on their own. And for most of them, there's nobody there to act as a check. And Stephen Hayes always would tell his teachers, it's like, look, follow the curriculum, follow the curriculum. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. He'd already done that. Just do this. So anytime you have students who are just strictly following one set of kata or one set of rules, now it's not all that creative, is it? Or it doesn't allow people to explore all that much, the boundaries and the fringes of where that art could go. They have to stay here. And yet, I think we've personally witnessed, as Mr. Hayes probably did, so many people who would eventually branch out and start interpreting the martial art, ninjutsu, in such a way that people could look at that and just say, that's not really even ninjutsu anymore. You're fighting, or you're training with swords and you're playing games with shuriken stars, but you're not really doing the art. And so to me, the danger is twofold. Again, the greatest strength is the greatest weakness. There's a danger in people trying to grow and develop this art so much that they lose sight of the origins. There's a reason we have those 9 lineages and the scrolls and the kata that come from those as a good baseline. And the more we deviate from that, the more we have to ask ourselves, the more we have a responsibility to kind of verify that what we're doing is valid, which I think some people do and some people don't. So that's one of the risks. We try adding to things and personalizing it, which is good, but we do it in such a way that the original stuff is lost. The same token is the weakness is on the other side. The threat is people do nothing but, and I've talked to people who have done this, they've told me they do nothing but the kata right out of the scrolls. That's what they do. There's no effort to, well, how would you do this if this happened? How would you do it if you lived in this part of the world? They don't deal with that. No, we're doing the scrolls. That's what's holy. And so now the danger becomes where we're literally imitating the movement and material that somebody from hundreds and hundreds of years ago thought was important, without really knowing how well that is applicable to the modern world. So in the old days, perhaps we would use Kyoketsu Shoge or a Baka Hatsugama to train with. Very kind of weird, eclectic type of weapon, very strange. Back in the day, when you had to kind of fight somebody or a group of people on a horse, those things might have had, or with a sword, those weapons might have had more applicability. Whereas now, if that's what you're learning, it's great from a historical standpoint. But then we have to ask, where are we going with the art?
Thanks. That's a balance that I know we're trying to find a way to walk ourselves. There's the challenge of how do you adapt this moving forward to meet modern demand, but still try to hold true to traditional principle.
For people who are listening to this,
Mhm.
my own personal belief is that there's a lot in the world that isn't just black or white.
Mhm.
Things are more complex. We all have lots of questions, some of the ones that you're asking,
Mhm.
and they're fairly involved.
Mhm.
It's not what year did you start your training? Great, got it. Oftentimes, the answers that we're seeking aren't as simple as blue
Mhm.
or 27. There's a lot to them, and there's a perspective that comes from personality, experience, history, or whatever. So in way of my explaining why some of my answers kind of tend to ramble,
Mhm.
I think it's because there's a depth and a breadth to those questions, and the answers are not so simple.
That's actually, I mean, a big part of what I'm looking for with some of this is I know it's difficult, especially in the context of a Zoom call where it's like, hey, you got 35 minutes, get it all on paper real fast.
Yeah,
There's, you and I have I have the advantage of, years and years and years of working with you and getting a chance to kind of learn this approach and this way of
right.
thinking over time.
To that, I would add something to one of the questions you asked earlier about this training session coming up
Hmm.
here, in that I think it's really great. I mean, Mark Davis is an exceptional instructor, an exceptional practitioner. He's frankly just very, very good at what he does there. And so I think it's very beneficial, very good for people, my people, to go see him. I think I've been impressed with Hardy Merritt from the first time I met him. There was something about him. Now, here we are a million years later, and look how far he's come in this art. Um, in my mind, he's a tremendous practitioner of this art, and so much so that he is somebody that I have told, as you know, I've told my own students, look, after I'm gone, if I'm retired or whatever, and you need help, you need assistance, you want guidance, you want to test yourself, you want to check something out, call Hardy. Call Hardy. And honestly, there aren't many people out there that I would feel that comfortable with. And so the fact that you have Mark and Hardy at this place, what a thing to take advantage of. I think they have two very different approaches to their instruction, maybe even their practice. I do as well. And I think that's going to be one of the things, one of the strengths to the art moving forward, is to have some folks out there that are willing to take the lead and do so in not just an effective way or a practical way, but also an ethical way. And so I was, when I found out that Mark had gone out to Colorado and you can edit all this as you see fit. When he had gone out, do you still hear me?
Yeah, you've actually half answered. You've half answered two planned questions that I have.
Oh, okay.
So funny enough. Yeah.
To get to hear the names of the folks that were out there doing training, I instantly thought, wow, that's just a great group of people to be training with. So I was very, very happy about that. Very, very good. So my apologies for interrupting before you began. Let's.
No, that's my kind of interruption there. It's the one where we actually get a lot out of it. So let's to jump back then maybe just a little bit. We're going to kind of revisit this maybe in a very short way here shortly.
Sure.
So we have a great instructorship coming in between the three of you gentlemen taking the time to teach us. And if you had some advice for a student coming to train at a conference like this, maybe it's their first time doing something like this. Perhaps they haven't had a chance to train outside of their school much since the pandemic. That was 3 years, for a lot of folks of kind of maybe training in a silo.
Yeah.
What benefits and sort of key takeaways would you have them keep an eye out for? What do you hope students get out of this?
It's a funny thing because again, I think Mark Davis is an exceptional teacher and practitioner. I think Hardy Merritt is just outstanding. I think he's got a very good grasp of the practicality, but also has an understanding of the deeper issues behind it. So these two guys are just really great to train with. The thing is, each student, every person that goes there may be looking for something different. So there are people out there who really enjoy training with me. I know there are people that don't. And the same would probably, the same could be said for Stephen Hayes, right? There are a lot of people who consider themselves very lucky to be able to train with him and still do. There are others that didn't want to have anything to do with him. And that's more to do with them than it is him or me or Mark or Hardy. So these are two very, very talented guys going there. The key is going to be, it's not so much what I would advise people to do. If I had advice, I would say, look, watch them, listen to how they teach, watch what they're showing, try it out, and see what seems to work the best for you. There may be one teacher whose presentations kind of resonate for you. Whether that has to do with the effectiveness or the teaching approach or your own physicality or history, who knows? But there'll be, look for that kind of connection. Oftentimes we have our own approaches. It's one of the reasons I've encouraged you and Mark and others to go out and visit these other instructors. Now, there are honestly instructors out there that I would say, yeah, might not want to go visit them. But hey, if you do, go ahead, have fun, see what you think. I'll be interested in your opinion. And this is a way we explore. So My advice would be to, yeah, watch, listen, find the teaching approaches that seem to resonate with you the most. And I mean, some of this may be new, but dive into it. Mark Davis may have a very different approach to teaching a particular technique than I might, or Hardy Merritt for that matter. So what my advice would be, really listen to what those guys are saying and see if you can get some new perspective on this art that I haven't yet provided as a teacher, or it's coming from an angle that I haven't approached it from. And I think having different teachers there is a wonderful opportunity for people to really hit upon something that has been perhaps a little elusive for them.
An important thing for us here, I think about folks that are maybe upper level belts that are attending this event. How can we as students, as up and coming leaders, as teachers of other students, as owners of schools, how do we build a stronger community with one another? How do we continue to, as I put to Mr. Davis and Mr. Merritt, how do we raise the tide here together? What do you see as the path forward?
Well, it's a great question, and I think that this excuse me, this conference, this training session coming up is just exactly one of the vehicles that will help do that. I think it's fine, or maybe it's not fine, but there are people that exist in kind of a cult-like atmosphere sometimes, where there's their school, their teacher, and there's nothing else. Don't go train anywhere else. And I would be cautious about that. Usually those types of positionings comes from either financial or ego, emotional types of places. And um, I want to have people have a direction, let's say, to go in. So one of the things I'm trying to do with my senior people is encourage them to seek out other instructors. So you guys are going to see Mr. Davis in Boston. I've encouraged people to go and train with Hardy, and there are others out there as well. And in my mind, it's a no lose scenario, because when you go and you train, somebody may teach you something that you disagree with or doesn't work for you, and you can go, okay, great, I'm going to put that on the shelf, or I'll set that aside. But what else have we learned? What have we gained? What insight? What experience? And I think there's a tremendous benefit to having us all get together from time to time, as many people as we can, so the instructors and the students can meet. And just watching a Mark Davis or Hardy Merritt, I might go, wow, that's a cool approach to teaching that technique. I hadn't thought of that before. And that's what the students can get out of this. That's part of what I think will hold us together as we come across. In class, and you've been there are times when I will refer to, hey, this is something Mr. Hayes taught me. This is something I picked up from Mark Davis. Even Hardy Merritt, right? Where we've said, I learned this from Hardy. Let's use this. This is going to make our training better, I think, stronger. Sometimes it's a physical technique, sometimes it's a training method. But the more we all can bounce things off of each other, the more we all see what each other is doing, the more there is a freedom, a sense of camaraderie with the various instructors. I think that will benefit the students tremendously, and I think it will benefit the instructors tremendously. I think it lowers the threats and the risks to the validity of the art, as we discussed earlier.
Well, we really look forward to getting a chance to follow that example that you guys are going to be putting out in front of us here in October. It really is an honor just to get you all just to get you three there. And again, from me to you, I really appreciate your time this morning with us here. So,
See, I'm looking forward to going to this myself. I get to teach, which to me is, if you haven't noticed, it's always fun,
Mhm.
right? Excuse me. If we're not having fun in doing our training,
Mhm.
maybe go see some other people, and see why we're not, why this is not an enjoyable experience. But I also get to go as a student because I want to watch what everybody else is doing and pick up some things there. And I'm so looking forward to that training event. I think it's going to be a blast.
Hanshi Poliquin, thank you again very much for jumping in with us here today. We're going to get a chance to see you on October 22nd. And
Really looking forward to it.
yes, we're looking forward to having you. If you haven't yet, please, we'll provide the link here after this video for the NENC tickets. Please go ahead and sign up. Let us know if there are any questions. And Hanshi, I just want to say you've been my teacher for a long time. You've been a mentor to me, and training with you has helped me move through my life with more skill. And I couldn't thank you enough. Thanks so much for being here
Now,
today.
I really appreciate you saying that, and I think that for me is part of the joy, part of the fun, part of why I'm teaching, and part of why I'm still involved in all this. It's just kind of helping each other grow a bit. So I really appreciate that.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you here in October. You take care, and we'll catch you on the mat.
Hey, thanks. Talk to you later.
Take care, sir.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.